Trust your body.
Mm.
Like your body always knows the answer.
Welcome to the Love Atlas. Each episode brings you thought leaders, experts, and everyday people to share unique perspectives about their profound insights, especially when it comes to relationships. Today, I'm thrilled to have Travis Ambrose here with us, and he is a dating and relationship coach specializing, I believe, especially when it comes to avoidant attachment and just letting go of the past, healing avoidant attachment. It's great to have you here, Travis. So tell us a little bit about what inspired you to focus on these important topics when it comes to personal growth and healing relationships.
I was hyper avoidant in a long-term relationship. I was in a 7-year relationship, and
Wow.
I didn't know anything about like healthy relationship dynamics. I didn't know anything about attachment theory. I didn't know how like the trauma of my youth and growing up impacted my relationship patterns in adulthood. I didn't know anything about nervous system regulation. I didn't know anything about communication. And I I was constantly seeking answers. I was always looking for something outside of myself, like thinking I was going to be in the next, the next article, the next
Yeah.
reel that I looked at, the next, podcast, the next book.
Mhm.
And I still just felt like a victim to my own, patterning. So like my avoidant tendencies were initial defensiveness, right? Like so often if someone's has avoidant attachment tendencies, and I like to say that. I like to say tendencies because people like to put themselves in a box, but they like to put other people in a box. So they say like, "Oh, I'm avoidant, I'm anxious, I'm disorganized, I'm
Right.
secure, whatever." But it's like, no,
Yeah.
you're not. Like you're bigger than that.
Yeah.
It, your attachment style is not your identity. So I like to say avoidant. I like to say attachment tendencies. So my tendencies were like defensiveness, um, gaslighting, shutdown, withdrawal. And like it was most of the time in relationships where, someone's avoidant or someone's anxious, like they end up in partnership with the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Anxious often polarizes, or I mean, it magnetizes avoidant, vice versa.
Right.
And they're like the perfect storm to just like trigger the hell out of each other
Yeah.
and create this like vicious loop, this vicious cycle, this negative like pattern dance. And
Yeah.
it's the same old song every single time.
Hmm.
And so I would get hyper defensive, dig my heels in, combat, like fight. And when I think about it, like my body was like telling me so much about what was about to happen. And
Yeah.
I didn't know how to listen to that.
Yeah.
And it was just this the entire relationship was characterized by like a lot of dysfunction and unhealthy patterns. And that's not like, that's not to place the blame on either person.
Yeah.
Um, and my journey since that relationship ended has been like waking up and coming back home to myself, rediscovering myself, because ultimately, like I really lost myself in that relationship. It's really codependent.
Yeah.
And that's often how unhealthy or dysfunctional relationships lean, is like towards this really unhealthy codependency, anxious
Mhm.
avoidant relationships, codependent.
Yeah.
And both people lose themselves. Both people abandon themselves. Like Gabor Mate has a quote that I just say all the time, and it's when you trade authenticity for attachment, you lose touch with your gut feelings.
Hmm.
And so many people do this, and this is what I was
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
So I completely lost myself,
Right.
and I was depressed, anxious. It's just living like a really miserable, dissociated existence. I was perpetually stoned. I smoked weed every single day, like
Yeah.
probably more than half my waking life through my 20s and in my early 30s now.
Yeah.
I was high.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize that that was a maladaptive coping mechanism to help me disconnect like get some space from the discomfort of my own truth, like trying to scream at me that something needed to be different.
Right.
So I would just like numb it out. Let's
Wow.
just push that to the side. Let's not look at that. It's like
Yeah.
my own inner knowing bubbling up.
We're not taught how to cope with these kind of dynamics in relationships. And especially as you mentioned in your 20s, you're just learning and growing at that point. So you don't know how to address any of these avoidant attachment issues. I mean, I don't even like to say issues because as you mentioned earlier, you're way bigger than that. But at the same time, how do you even know that it's an avoidant struggle that you're having? And you have to dig deep and figure out like why you are the way you are, especially when it comes to your childhood. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about what are the common signs that someone might be struggling with avoidant attachment, and how can they
Yeah.
begin to address these issues?
Yeah. So some of the hallmarks are like difficulty with kind of basic communication.
Okay.
Like communicating is difficult, like communicating plans, communicating like boundaries or creating structure that might limit or inhibit their sense of like autonomy or independence.
Right.
Um, so and I also just want to preface before I list out all these, it's like just because you might identify with one or some doesn't automatically mean like, but can I swear or
Yeah, yeah, it's okay.
it's like it's not it doesn't mean like all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, I have avoidant attachment. It's like
Right, right.
maybe, and also maybe you're like in a relationship that you don't want to be in. And this is something I get a lot. It's like, how do I discern? Is this my intuition or is it am I avoidantly attached or anxious
Yeah,
attached? And I
yeah.
can touch on that in a second, but
Right.
kind of the hallmarks are difficulty communicating, wanting a lot of like space, like really prioritizing space and independence, almost um, like they're hyper independent. You know,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes high achievers,
Mm-hmm.
CEOs, highly successful people might have avoidant tendencies when it comes to relationships.
Okay.
Um, Difficulty communicating, space, um, emotional, I don't want to say difficulty, like being vulnerable, difficulty
Right.
holding space for
Yeah.
emotions. Like someone else's emotional experience can very quickly like overwhelm and kind of
Yeah.
smother their sense of,
Right.
again, autonomy, independence, safety. Um, like they don't want to necessarily have to caretake. Like they'll in an instant kind of take on so much responsibility for someone else's emotions
Yeah.
and or feel like that's their job, and it's like so their nervous system will react, become activated, and then they'll create space and distance,
Mm-hmm.
and so they might like check out, they might like just kind of like leave the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
uh, eyes glaze over. um I'd say these are like the three like top characteristics of
Mm-hmm.
someone with avoidant attachment.
Okay. And then what about, I know your focus is letting go of the past. How do you help support someone who is so stuck when it comes to the past, right? Because I had a client one time and that client was mentioning how challenging it is for her to focus on her current relationship because she keeps comparing her current partner to her past partner and she wants to let go of that, but that has been a really big struggle.
Mm-hmm. So I typically say like you're not just gonna consciously will yourself to let go. Like if you're really hung up and stuck on your past, there's something hanging on to that subconsciously. So
Mhm.
I do a lot of I'll do a lot of work derived from like internal family systems. It's like the formal healing modality that if anyone's looking for like to really go deep in their own healing of their own patterns, their own past, and developing a really strong relationship with themselves. So they experience more calm, more peace, more confidence, clarity, and compassion. To
Mm-hmm.
look into working with someone who's a skilled internal family systems facilitator. Um, some other like synonyms, there's like inner child work, shadow
Right.
work, but sometimes it's like, how do I find someone that does
Right.
that?
Yeah.
Um, but someone that's stuck on the past, it's like that would tell me that there's still some wound that hasn't been fully addressed. There's still some
Right.
emotion stuck somatically or like in their body
Mhm.
that perhaps they didn't give themselves permission to feel at all or perhaps
Right.
fully.
Yeah.
Uh, and you've got a couple kind of tapping into that uh, possibly suppressed emotion with rewriting your story, like
Mm-hmm.
looking at the just like the inner monologue, like what are the sorts of like thoughts, what are the things that you tell yourself, what's the
Right.
story that's running in your head about
Yeah.
that past person, what did you think that past like that person in your past was going to help you feel, like what feelings would you get access to by being with them, by getting to build a life with them.
Right.
There's an attachment to an expectation of
Yeah.
like this fantasy, this fabrication of what could
Exactly.
have been.
Yeah, yeah. And I've heard so many people say that where they're kind of stuck in the past, where it's like their current situation is wonderful, but at the same time, as years progress in that relationship, obviously, like you start seeing more flaws when it comes to your current partner at times because, not that that's the focus, but because you're spending a lot of time with them. And then, it's easy to just go back and live in that fantasy and think like, oh, what could have been?
Hmm.
And I think that's where I've just had so many people talk about that, like, oh, I'm fine and everything is great, but I am curious about what could have been with this person who really did like me at that period, and I just decided not to pursue that partner or whatnot.
Hmm. Yeah, this is another kind of phenomenon of that's common with people who have avoidant attachment tendencies.
Mhm.
What we call that like the phantom ex. It's kind of the one who got away.
Right.
You're in a relationship that's good, and
Yeah.
yet you keep fantasizing or idealizing your ex,
Yeah.
um, and comparing them. And this because you kind of when time goes on, you forget all the reasons why that relationship didn't work, and then it's like the highlights can kind of stand out. You
Exactly.
know, they were
Yeah.
attractive, you guys had fun
Yeah.
together, maybe
Yeah.
there were some you talked about a future and there were some shared
Yeah.
values or what have you,
Yeah.
and you attach to those things because you're in a relationship that maybe is not quite up to snuff, or there's some challenges, or you're feeling
Yeah.
triggered or activated, or
Right.
um, you start so your nervous system starts to react in your present
Mhm.
relationship, but the
Mhm.
thought of someone who's distant, far away, like who's not actually possible to be with at this point, brings a sense of calm or relaxation. uh,
Right.
like it helps soothe their
Mhm.
nervous system. This is like the common, like when so many people ask me like about like an avoidant ex, will they come back? And sometimes they'll just like go on and never look back. But
Yeah.
sometimes that phantom ex comes up and they start like ruminating, and because contrary to popular belief, like people with avoidant attachment also crave intimacy. They also want closeness. They
Mhm.
also want to be in a relationship. It's just that's like when they actually kind of get near that, it feels threatening. So they run
Right.
away from it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but when they get out of a relationship, it's like there's an immediate like big exhale, like
yeah,
I don't feel trapped anymore. I don't feel threatened. It's like,
right.
oh, I'm free. I'm completely independent. Like
Yeah,
my life
yeah,
is mine and I don't have to attend to anyone else's needs. And then some time goes on and they get kind of used to their life without that person. And then they start to think like, oh, damn, like they're pretty good. Like, and they start
yeah,
like they forget the reasons why it didn't work, why they were stressed.
As human beings, like I've noticed this a lot. Why is the grass always greener on the other side, right? You can be so content being single or being in a relationship.
Yeah, why is the grass always greener? I would say it's because as humans we're novelty seekers. And
Yeah.
especially in this day and age where we're just flooded with instant gratification and so much, so much dopamine. Um, I think, and then also like the state of dating with dating apps,
Hmm.
and they're designed to keep you on the app. They're similar sort of um, they're similar sort of design to like social media platforms to kind of draw you in, feel addicting, keep you scrolling, keep you on
Right.
them.
Yeah.
Um, so I think because we're novelty seekers
Yeah.
and we want we want all those feel good neurotransmitters that are just
Mhm.
effortlessly released in
Right.
early on in a relationship, all the dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, all these things that you can get and do get in like in a committed relationship with time, but it takes more intentional effort
Yeah.
to cultivate the kind of relationship that continues to nurture those feelings. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
takes more effort. I mean, it's
Right.
harder.
It
And
is. And as you mentioned with these dating apps and instant gratification, it there are, people who have approached me where they're like, oh my goodness, like I'm constantly on a date or I'm constantly swiping left and right. And that attention, whether it's a man or a woman, it can really get to you. And then when you find that right partner, you will have the tendency to question it, especially as you mentioned, being in a long-term relationship, you do have to put in that effort. You do have to really work on it. So what advice do you have for people who are used to that? Um, it is an addiction, and
mhm,
getting in a relationship, like how can they, if those addiction tendencies do come back, where it's like, oh, is this right? Or where they start questioning their healthy relationship, what can they do at that given moment because they were so addicted to that single life and swiping left and right scene.
mhm. So I would encourage, I mean, that's a multifaceted approach to that. First things first is like know who the hell you are before you get into a relationship. Stop expecting that someone else is going to save you or give you clarity or make your life better. Like you need to be living a life that you're like fucking stoked about already. Like you're like a cool ass
Yeah.
person
Yeah.
that you're the person that you would want to be with. Maybe not
Hmm.
like exactly, not like a carbon copy, but
Yeah.
and not just like living the life that feels good, but living a life that is fulfilling and gives you a sense of like meaning and purpose. Like that's what you want to find in singlehood, so that when you find a like when you're searching for a relationship or looking to create a relationship with someone, like it's on like just a body level and then like an energetic level, you'll feel when someone kind of fits like a glove, uh, and aligns with your sense of like purpose and meaning and the things that are important to you. So how do you start living a life that's meaningful and purposeful? Is like you need to know what's important to you. Like it doesn't mean that you have to be, creating some like world changing charitable organization. If like being a really good mom or dad is like there's a lot of meaning in that. A
Yeah.
really good son, daughter, sibling, like there's meaning in that. Like,
Hmm.
but you need to figure out what it is that you value and start to identify like what are the discrepancies?
Yeah.
Where are you not like putting your money where your mouth is? Where
Yeah.
are you saying I value this, but in actuality, you don't with your actions because your actions speak louder than words or intentions. And
Yeah.
maybe you don't actually value those things as much as you say, and you need to stop like fooling yourself.
Yeah.
It's all
Yeah.
about finding your authentic expression. Your authentic expression is not good or bad, it's just who you are. If you
Yeah.
like to
And then
stay in Friday night and
what about people who do value superficial things? Like, some people will mention to me like, oh, I really want a partner who's like, looks a certain way, or I want him to make X amount of money, and
Hmm.
that just matters a lot to me. What advice do you have for people like that? Because again, we can look at that on a very superficial level. However, if that's how they were raised and that's really a big part of who they are, how can they reevaluate those things or even let go and find meaningful values? But it's tricky because what if that really means to them that their partner has
Hmm.
to look a certain way or they have to make a certain amount of money?
Hmm. Yeah, so this starts getting into uh it's like the work that I'll do with my clients is like really digging into the 7 layer deep why behind any belief that you're carrying. So sure,
Yeah.
it's important that you feel attracted to your partner, I would say, and it's not inherently wrong if you're like, I want to be with someone who's like affluent, or maybe it's ambitious. But the thing is like take whatever the superficial level value is and ask yourself like, why is that important? What are
Mm.
the feelings that and this is just such a simple question, but you can always ask this for all these different scenarios. Is like, what are the feelings you think that's going to give you access to? Because
Mm.
there's something, uh, there's some belief subconsciously that thing is going to give you a feeling that you're not currently capable of having,
Mm-hmm.
unless you have that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, I'll just tell you, like, spoiler alert, that's not true. Like,
What do
you
you
actually
mean?
have
What do you mean?
your access to those feelings is not contingent upon getting that superficial value.
Mm.
Whether you see that or not is like, it's up to you. And maybe you're not there yet, that you'll be able to recognize that. But
Mm-hmm.
at some point, like, you were conditioned and you learn these things. So it's about like reevaluating your conditioning. And it starts with like, okay, but why? What are the feelings I think I'll have access to? Why? 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 So
Mm-hmm.
what's underneath wanting to be with someone who makes a certain amount of money? Is it
Yeah.
like security?
Mm-hmm.
Is it safety?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a sense of like external validations? People will see me with this person, or like we'll have a certain level of financial status, and people see that, and I'll get the
Mm-hmm.
validation. I'll feel good about myself because I need someone else to tell me that needs to give me permission to feel good about myself, because
Right.
that came somewhere in your childhood. I almost guarantee it.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. But then if someone has lived their life this way, right?
Hmm.
As you mentioned, the instant gratification of external validation, how can they unlearn that?
Hmm.
Um, will they spend their entire life trying to unlearn it? Or is it something, as you mentioned, why, layer one layer at a time? Um, is there a way to, I guess my big question is there a way to unlearn it sooner rather than later?
Mm. So this is the dirty work of healing, of
Yeah.
doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
That's, it's not sexy. It takes time. And in a world of instant gratification, I'll tell you, this isn't it. You're not going
Yeah,
to get instant gratification.
right.
Um, but like, if you're listening to this right now, or you follow these types of accounts like on Instagram or social media, YouTube, wherever, and you're starting to like take this in, and I would encourage you to like not just take this in and be like, oh, interesting, like I need to unlearn this stuff, but like, oh, what did that guy mention? Find someone who's skilled in internal family systems or
Yeah.
shadow work, inner child
Mhm.
work. Like, invest, like be willing to invest in yourself. Don't think
Yeah.
that you have to do it alone, because like I said at the
Yeah.
beginning, it's like I read so many books, listened to so many podcasts, always thinking that the answer, like someone was going to tell me something. But
Yeah.
that again was giving me the sense of like dopamine and like all these
Yeah.
like feel good feelings, like I was learning, I was doing the work, but I wasn't actually doing it.
The action. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And then, as you mentioned, inner child work, I hear that a lot, and everyone hears that a lot. And I know it's um uh extremely important to heal your inner child. But how do you heal your inner child? I guess my big question is when you don't know what your inner child even went through. And the
Mhm.
reason why I'm asking that is because I come from a family where, mom and dad are together. uh, loving family. I've always been treated, in a great manner. And I would say, princess-like treatment, not materialistic wise, but especially when it comes to love. Love has been a huge thing when it comes to my family. And it's challenging for me personally to know what I have been through as a child because I remember a fun childhood, playing outside, having a great time, but at the same time, that's what we remember. So how do we even know, as you mentioned, avoidant attachment and all these things that might come up that are connected to our childhood? How do we work on that then? Like what do we like how do we even know what we went through, basically what I'm saying.
Hmm. So inner child work is not an intellectual process. It's not a I'm gonna see a journal prompt and all of a sudden know what to write and journal on it, or I'm just gonna think about it and resolve all my
Right,
issues.
right.
And a lot of people that will come to me have like a really strong self-awareness and they're great intellectualizers. They might understand. So you might even know like, oh yeah, like these things happened in my childhood and I get like it's impacted me in a certain way and now I show up, this is why I'm avoidant or this is why I'm codependent or people pleaser or whatever, what have you.
Right, right. They can
But
pinpoint it. Yeah.
they can pinpoint it, but like how do you know what they went through is by so what you'll learn in IFS and a great entry point into that sort of work is a book called No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz.
Hmm.
And what you'll find is that there's these subconscious, we'll call like protectors or manager parts of your like subconscious psyche.
Hmm.
They're typically the parts of you that make up like your personality. So if you're like say an overachiever or a high achiever, let's just say that, right? There's a part of you that like is using that as a protection mechanism to like feel safe, to get a sense of validation or worthiness. And it's not typically willing to, um, uh, um, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not typically willing to relinquish that control or that pressure. So the thing is like this is the top level. This is kind of where you have to start, and you begin to have a conversation with these different parts of your subconscious. And what I mean by conversation is like, okay, like you've got to drop into a relaxed parasympathetic state in your body. Parasympathetic meaning like a rest and digest nervous system, like I'm nice and relaxed. Do some breath work, feel into your body. And it starts at the level of your body,
Hmm.
right? Bessel van der Kolk has a quote, expanding your physical awareness will release you from the tyranny of your past.
Hmm.
So it all starts at the level of your body.
Right.
And when you relax into this, you start to just like notice how these thoughts, these impulses start to show up, and there's a somatic connection. That's the
Hmm.
entry point. And
Okay.
then you just ask certain questions, getting to know like what, asking questions to this part.
Hmm.
What is it doing for you? What does it want you to know?
Right.
What's it afraid of? Like if it let up a little bit, like what to think would happen?
Hmm.
The answers to those questions typically take you
Mm.
another layer deeper. And all of a sudden it answers like right, like I'm afraid of being abandoned.
Right.
Um, and then what's really incredible during this process, facilitating this process is it sparks seemingly unrelated memories that you
Hmm.
wouldn't have had conscious access to if you were
Mm.
trying to like think your way there. And all of a
Right.
sudden, a memory from when you were like 8 years old pops up,
Yeah.
and then you go there with
Right.
permission from you. Like before you go another layer deeper, you always need essentially permission from the protector because
Right.
they're there for a reason. They don't want you to go there for a reason
Mm.
until eventually you access your inner child and
God.
you get to know your inner child in the same way. And at at each level as you descend down, you're always coming back to your body and checking in to see if you're connected to feelings of like compassion, curiosity,
Yeah.
connectedness, confidence, calm. So then once you get to your inner, like find your inner child, and there's lots of different kind of versions of inner child,
Mm-hmm.
then you extend so much empathy and curiosity towards this
Mm-hmm.
version of you. And you just like listen. You just, it's about like holding space, listening, getting to know, not trying to fix, not trying to like shove into the
Right.
closet or make go away.
Yeah.
And you learn like essentially firsthand. You just listen.
Mm-hmm.
You're not like in a way you are thinking, but you're not like thinking to conjure up. You're like
Right.
floating a question out to the nethers and like
Yeah.
intuitive answers come through.
Right.
And
Right.
this helps you connect to the emotional experience of your inner child that you may have forgotten or not realized is stored. And then
Yeah.
there's ways to sort of like release and process that emotion in the present and help like bring them out of being stuck there.
Right. Right. I have this habit of analyzing everything on a
Hmm.
very critical level. Sometimes if I have a certain thought or I'm anxious about something, I start digging very deep to figure out what is the reasoning behind it. And I'm the type of person who wants answers pretty fast. And if I don't have if I don't have answers, then I start thinking something is wrong with the situation because I don't have
Hmm.
the answers, right?
Hmm.
And as you mentioned, you have to be in a very calm state of mind and allow the healing to even take place because sometimes we have this guard up where if I don't get my answers, then I'm like, okay, on to why am I not getting my answers, right? Then I start questioning it and it's layer by layer and we won't be able to I guess, fully heal, or if we're not even allowing ourselves to heal because we're so stuck in figuring out what the exact situation might be.
Yeah, even that is a learned response somewhere, likely
Yeah.
stemming back
Oh,
to your
for sure.
childhood, right?
Yeah.
So this is really common a lot of times, and it's especially common with people with avoidant tendencies,
Mm,
um, is to think like they don't really remember much of their childhood or like it was fine, like
yeah.
because they learned to sort of
Yeah.
they've learned to kind of put their needs to the side and just
Yeah.
take care of themselves and
Right.
like I'm fine, I'm good,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you're avoidant, but I'm that just
No,
like that was a
it's
good
very
thought, right?
true. It's very, very true. I agree with that.
And a lot of people will describe like I had my childhood was fine, it was good. And there are like even the most loving parents, well-intentioned parents still fuck up.
Oh, for
And
sure. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
maybe they don't want to be like their parents. So they swing to the other end of the extreme,
Right.
and that's going to leave an imprint. That's going to
Yeah.
leave an indelible imprint on you that's going to affect you into adulthood. So
Yeah.
even though most well-meaning parents still mess up and
Yeah.
still can create like or they'll still not meet some of your needs
Mm-hmm.
almost assuredly. But the good thing is like you only need to be emotionally attuned to your kids like probably like 40% plus or minus. Like I've heard different stats, but like 30 to 50%, we'll call
Mm-hmm.
it 40%.
Mm-hmm.
You only need to be emotionally attuned to your kids 40% of the time for them to be securely attached in adulthood.
Yeah. Mm,
Um, but that's still a lot for like really needy kids, right? So it's hard to be a parent.
right.
Um, and Gabor Mate, so I learned a lot from Gabor Mate, Richard Schwartz, Bessel van der Kolk, Peter Levine,
Mm-hmm.
and he talks about like capital T trauma and lowercase t trauma. And lowercase t trauma, like capital T trauma is like, that's the big stuff. That's like very obvious trauma. Lowercase t trauma is more like the CPTSD, like complex PTSD, where it's like maybe nothing significantly traumatic happened to you that,
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to get into the
Right, right,
boat of
right.
like comparing trauma, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's the smaller stuff. And
Yeah.
the not meeting your needs, like chronic unmet needs through
Mhm.
adolescence.
Mhm.
We call that lowercase t trauma that will impact you and like impact your attachment style and relationships in
Yeah.
adulthood.
Yeah, yeah. And everyone has a story, just by saying, I just wanted to put emphasis on saying that, oh, my childhood was lovely and I remember having fun, but there's a lot of what we take in with the energy that's around us as a baby, as while we're growing up. So there's not just good memories, there's also absolutely bad memories that we might not even remember, but we've taken it in. So I think, as you clarified, there is trauma, whether it's smaller on a smaller scale or a bigger scale, but we're still working on it throughout our lives, and it will somehow show up into our adulthood, and that's where the work takes place to be able to peel it layer by layer. I wanted to ask a little bit about a transforming experience when it comes to maybe one of your clients. Has there been a situation where they started seeing things very clearly and they were able to really work on themselves and live a happier life?
Yeah, I would say so. One client comes to mind, and she's giving me permission to like share her story and her name, and um,
Oh,
so one of my clients, Meg, she's had like 15 to 20 years of therapy under her belt. Like she's
yeah.
a practiced, she's a veteran in personal development and personal growth. Um, and she came in with like anxious attachment. I work with men and women. They
Hmm.
usually come to me for some like attachment reason. And ultimately, like I'm a relationship coach, but really that's a guise for a relationship to self coach
Hmm.
because the health of your relationships stems from that.
Hmm.
And she just immediately took to this process of like of parts work and going like into her body. She like followed through on all of the breath work and like
Wow.
nervous system regulatory practices that I gave her. Like she really like showed up and did the work because like with anything in this life, like you're gonna get out of it what you put into it. And
100%. Yeah.
she just had sometimes it can almost be a psychedelic experience for clients when they're and even for me, like the facilitator.
Mhm.
And she had revelatory insights and connections and breakthroughs connecting with, the parts of her that are underneath her anxious tendencies, right? Her people pleasing, her,
Mhm.
she's a high achiever as well. Um, and she connected with her inner child in a way that she never had through like the traditional DBT therapy that she had done.
Mhm.
And she loves her therapist and continues working with her therapist, right? Like they're complementary.
Mhm.
But she just had like incredible breakthroughs um, and emotional release, tapping into like memories that she didn't know was there. She didn't know that she was like holding on to this emotion. So
Yeah.
she has like released so much over the course of our time together. And she just told me in our last session that she's like she's never felt so just calm and at peace within
Yeah.
herself and so
Right.
clear on like who she is and
Mhm.
that she's okay with or
Mhm.
without someone else. Like she came in with like a lot of pressure of wanting to meet her person and like
Yeah.
right as so many people do.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
more pressure you put on it, it's like the more you're like almost you're
Oh,
energetically
totally.
repelling it.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
And I just like I know any day now she's gonna tell me she just met somebody great and
Yeah.
starting a new relationship with somebody. But in the meantime, she has so much love for herself in a way that she didn't have when we started working together.
Yeah. It's incredible.
And peace, calm, confidence is all those qualities that I said that you need as you go layers deep.
Yeah.
Compassion. They're the eight C's in IFS. It's like compassion, curiosity, confidence, clarity, connectedness, curiosity, creativity, and courage.
Right. That's wonderful. I love that story. And I wanted to ask, for someone who is willing to open up uh and do the healing work for example, someone new to this and hasn't really thought about, the inner child and all of these different factors. And sometimes it can be overwhelming thinking about even doing the work because you might have a lot of work to do, right? Because we all do. So, what advice do you have for someone who is just starting off? And let's say that they want to improve themselves and learn about themselves to be the best version of themselves. I know you did mention earlier asking why is very important. Just some simple advice like that do you have for anyone who is starting off with this journey?
Mm. Simple advice is maybe it's a little cliche, but it's like give yourself grace and trust that no matter how lost you feel, you're just wandering in the forest and you're actually right on course.
Mhm.
You're on the path, no matter how far off the path you feel. You're on the path.
That's wonderful.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's kind of the first because which leads me to I think maybe something a little more concrete is like you're not gonna no one's gonna shame themselves into change. Like
Mm-hmm.
shame begets more shame.
Mm-hmm.
So just check like your impetus for wanting to change, wanting to heal. What sort of energetic place are you coming from? Because the secret, like the paradox is that warmth and acceptance is the ultimate form of growth mindset. Like if you want to change anything, it starts with warmth and acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever it is about yourself that you're wanting to heal or change, you don't maybe maybe you don't like that you've been the avoidant one, or maybe you don't like how much you cling to others.
Mm-hmm.
Love and accept that part of you. Recognize that there's a really good reason that you're that way. And
Mm-hmm.
once you can see that, then it's like you get to operate from a place of like I get to change, not I have to change or I need to change. It's
Right.
like, oh, I get to change, but you're actually okay right now.
Love that. Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much. And do you have any, I would say one last piece of advice for your younger self that
Mhm.
you would like to maybe share?
Trust your body.
Mm,
Like your body always knows the answer.
yeah.
And our minds become a master at denying the wisdom of our body. But
Yeah.
your body knows. And it's gonna point
Uh,
you towards what's right, and it's gonna try pointing you away from what's wrong.
yeah.
And it will physiologically tell you. And it's like you just have to be brave enough to listen and trust it.
Yeah. Wow, that's just incredible advice. And I will definitely be applying that. I'm working on that. And I'm sure listeners are going to, love your advice. So thank you so much for showing up. I really appreciate it. Such a good conversation. And I learned so much from it because I have read a lot about attachment styles as well. And I know we can also be more than one. And it's good to know and have that awareness so that we can, work on our self, and as you mentioned, give ourselves self grace, that it's not about like I need to change, just like, go with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. This was a delight chatting with you.